Hey everyone, tonight we're dropping straight into a disaster. The maitre d' looked apologetic, almost uncomfortable, as she handed the platinum card back to Tasha. I'm sorry, ma'am. It's declined. Across town, I sat in a warm living room sipping mint tea while watching the feed from the restaurant's overhead camera. No one knew it, but those cameras had been connected to my private network for 3 weeks now. I'd asked a favor from someone I once mentored, a favor that paid off spectacularly. Tasha's jaw dropped, her voice rising in a sharp whisper. Try it again. That's impossible. The card was declined again. Darren fumbled in his pocket, pulling out a different one. Also declined. I didn't blink. I didn't smirk. I just watched. That joint account, the one they used to buy handbags and book luxury getaways. It had been frozen 10 minutes before their reservation. They forgot one detail: I still legally co-owned it. They stopped seeing me, but the bank didn't. You asked if I showered, I murmured into the quiet room. I cleaned up your future instead. Now you might be wondering how I got from handing out casseroles to freezing financial assets in a city I technically don't even own a mailing address in anymore. But first, a cheeky reality check. If you've ever been underestimated by someone who owes you more than they realize, this one's for you. So before you feel too secure about your smart locks or perfect brunch smile, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I'm doing here. And I'd love to know where you're tuning in from and what time it is there. Now turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soft noise, and let's get started tonight. The laughter at the brunch table was bright and hollow, the kind that echoes too long in a room and never touches anyone's chest. We were seated beneath a ceiling, dripping with crystal garlands and Pinterest-perfect greenery, the table heavy with cranberry-glazed meats and gluten-free scones. Tasha didn't eat, but insisted on serving. I sat at the far end, napkin folded just so in my lap, hands gently clasped, posture straight. Old-school grace. No one noticed. Tasha, in her satin blouse and faux laugh cadence, tilted her head and crinkled her nose. "Mum," she said, just loud enough, just innocent enough. "Did you forget to shower again this morning?" Silence peeled through the table like citrus oil on silver. One of her friends, probably named Kaylee or Briar or something herbaceous, giggled into her mimosa. Another reached for the cinnamon rolls like nothing had happened. But something had. I blinked once. Fork midair. Darren didn't look up. You know, Tasha continued swirling champagne like she studied neurology on the side. Older people stop noticing their own body odor. Sensory decline. It's a whole thing. Sad, right? She smiled. So I smiled too. Quietly. Let them think I didn't hear. That's the secret, you see. Silence ages better than outrage. Later that afternoon, I stood in the powder room staring at my reflection. I had showered. Of course I had. Lavender soap, the one Harold used to love. My sweater was clean. Hair pinned back with care. My fingers traced the pearl earrings I wore only on holidays or hearings. This wasn't about hygiene. It never had been. It was about disappearance, slow erasure. And in that mirror, I saw her again, the woman who pawned her wedding bangles 12 years ago to wire her son 10 grand for a business he hadn't finished building. I smiled back at her, but something in me twisted, not with bitterness, but with decision. Something ancient, like rope that had frayed for too long, finally curling into its own strength. By the time dessert was served, I'd made my choice. And here's a funny thing they don't teach you in retirement planning workshops. Sometimes you can still have power, even if you stopped being seen as dangerous. That's not just anecdotal, it's statistically supported in studies about social perception and ageism. Yes, I've been reading again. So while Tasha gushed about her trip to the Maldives, and Darren complained about yield rates, I sat at that table thinking about the safest way to become visible again without ever raising my voice. Here's one for you. Did you know flamingos lose their color if they stop eating shrimp? They fade, just vanish into beige. People do that too when they stop feeding on dignity. Not me, not anymore. That night, long after the last guest left and Darren locked the doors, I crept into the guest room they gave me and turned on the old tablet I used mostly for solitaire. It took a moment to boot up. The screen was cracked slightly in the corner. Kind of like me, really still functioning, still sharp. I remembered the joint account, back when Darren needed my credit to secure the down payment. He forgot, but I never took my name off. It had sat there quietly for years, like a faded post-it note on the fridge. Password reset check. Linked email still active. And there it was. Line by line, a record of every $900 candle and private Pilates retreat Tasha forgot to reimburse. Each dollar pulled like a thread through my patience. I leaned back against the headboard. Let the blue light cast shadows across the duvet. One click, and I could make it all stop. But I didn't. Not yet. Old age brings many things, some less delightful than others, but it also sharpens your sense of timing. Like the best courtroom lawyers, you learn when to stay quiet, when to let them hang themselves with their own rope. You asked if I smelled old, I whispered into the dark. I smell of lavender and legacy. Yours too. The first time I realized they were trying to disappear me was the morning I found the bathroom door locked. Not just locked, digitally sealed with a soft red light blinking at the handle. A smart lock. One of those sleek, app-controlled things that companies pitch as elder-friendly, which is code for controlled remotely. I stood in the hallway, blinking at the door like it had personally insulted me. It was 5:30 in the morning. The house was still, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator downstairs and the colder hum just under my skin. I pressed the handle gently. Nothing. Waited. Tried again. Still nothing. I didn't knock. I didn't call out. I just stood there in my slippers and pressed my palm to the smooth wood, noting how the new finish didn't quite match the rest of the hallway. They'd repainted without mentioning it. A few hours later, as the house woke up and coffee machines hissed their importance, Tasha strolled past with her mug and her robe tied in a bow so tight it looked like a warning. "Oh," she said. Pausing only slightly, we upgraded to smart locks. Helps with scheduling. Water bills were getting high. She didn't make eye contact. I nodded. She was testing control, and like most people who are used to being unchecked, she assumed silence meant permission. What she didn't know, what they never suspected, was that old women don't just store recipes and grudges. We store evidence. I found the old phone in the drawer later that day. The one Darren had given me 2 Christmases ago, still boxed in its original packaging, because I never adapted quickly enough for their taste. It still worked. The battery wasn't even bloated. I charged it beneath the mattress. That evening, I filmed Tasha adjusting the hallway thermostat from the stair landing. She thought I was napping. I snapped a photo of her app screen when the bathroom door blinked green and slid open. The code flashed briefly. I remembered all 6 digits. Each click, each adjustment, each smirk was documented. I didn't need confrontation. I needed proof. Now here's your old age wisdom fact for this round. Most people think elders forget everything. That's a myth. According to a 2023 study out of Stanford, we don't forget, we filter. We remember what matters. And sometimes what matters is exactly what they hope we'll miss. Also, fun fact, wombat poop is cube-shaped. Evolution's weird gift. Makes you think how nature really doesn't owe anyone symmetry or mercy. Anyway, on the 3rd evening, I made a call I hadn't made in years. The number wasn't saved, but I'd memorized it like scripture. Muscle memory, like tying a scarf just right, or icing your knees without making a sound. Marot, I whispered. A pause. Then éveillé. I thought you were still breathing. That's how she answered. No hello. Just raw honesty in a voice that once ran audit teams for 4 branches of a regional bank. Marot Ramirez. We worked together back when spreadsheets had actual columns you filled in by hand, and coffee tasted like burnt decisions. I need a favor, I said. She listened. Quietly. the kind of quiet that fills in blanks faster than anyone should be able to. I gave her only what was necessary: a joint account, no removal of signatures, no power of attorney shifts. Just weird behavior, bold spending, and a son too busy playing defense for his wife to notice the battlefield around him. "I'll pull what I can," Marot said. "If she's funneling or refinancing through your name, you'll need leverage." "I'm working on it." She paused again, then added softly, "You know, you always had that Sunday school vibe, but you were a hammer when you needed to be." I hung up, smiling. The next day, I went to a print shop 3 neighborhoods over, paid cash, didn't say much, just nodded when they handed me the manila envelope. Inside, a pre-filled authorization to freeze all outgoing funds from the joint account. I didn't file it. I just folded it. Slid it into a stitched pocket in my coat, one I'd sewn years ago, when I still believed the house we all lived in would be filled with love, not legal loopholes. Back home, the house was humming in that artificial calm they'd perfected. Eucalyptus oil in the vents. A new diffuser Tasha installed. "It helps reduce agitation," she said, looking directly at me like I was a diagnosis waiting to be printed. My agitation wasn't visible, but it had never been cleaner, sharper. That night, my phone buzzed. It was a voicemail from Moreau. "Yves," she said, voice tight. "It's worse than you thought. There's chatter. She's not just planning purchases. She's moving toward a refinance of the property. Your name's still attached on some documents. If she closes that before you act, static. No resolution. And yet I didn't panic. I walked to the dresser, opened the bottom drawer, pulled out the freeze form, slid it into the folder with the others. Here's the thing about people who mistake softness for weakness: they never notice when the air starts to change. They miss the quiet thunder, the brewing storm hidden in the way someone folds a napkin or closes a drawer slowly. That night, Tasha posted an Instagram story, a boomerang of her clinking glasses with a friend at brunch. Caption: "Blessed and booked." The diamond necklace in the video, I recognized it. The charge, $7,000 even. I checked the account. Card ending in 91, joint access, still active. The theft wasn't even subtle anymore. I opened my banking app, hovered over the freeze button. No confirmation emails would be sent. No alarms triggered. I tapped once. The banner turned green. Account frozen? Silent thunder. By the time Tasha's laughter cracked at the hostess stand, I was already in my robe, sipping chamomile by the window. The rooftop restaurant she picked, Celle du Ciel, was the kind of place where the appetizers cost more than my monthly prescription refill, and the ambiance made everything taste like secrets whispered behind crystal. They were there to impress investors. Tasha insisted on it. If they're going to trust us with money, she said the week before, they need to see how we live. And that night, they saw exactly that. I watched from the security feed piped into my tablet. Darren shifting uncomfortably, Tasha whispering like someone staging a coup in stilettos. When the hostess handed their card back a second time, you could practically hear the mood shift. One of the investors leaned back in his chair, eyebrows raised. Their server brought tap water. I brought peace. Not revenge, not yet. Just insurance. See, I'd spent the last 2 days quietly transferring key documents, things Darren once asked me to co-sign back when he still called me Mom, with warmth, into a safe deposit box downtown. I didn't tell anyone. Just took the early bus, nodded politely to the bank clerk, and slid those papers into place, one by one. Mortgage approvals, original equity agreements, even the prenup Darren thought was just a formality and had me hold on to. And, of course, the joint account agreement. Did you know that under current US banking regulations, joint account holders hold equal rights to freeze or restrict activity, even if one party forgets the other still breathes? Funny how laws outlive relationships. So when I watched Tasha's face, pale in real time, as her platinum failed to impress anyone but the surveillance system, I didn't feel victorious. I felt still. Old age wisdom. Here's your moment of clarity. People who call you invisible often forget the shadow you cast. And speaking of weird facts, did you know sloths can hold their breath longer than dolphins? 10 minutes. Meanwhile, I've been holding mine for 12 years. After dinner, they came home angry. Doors slammed, voices raised, wine glasses clinked with more force than necessary. I didn't go downstairs. I didn't ask questions. I just listened to the rhythm of unraveling. Tasha's voice came first. It's humiliating. Do you have any idea how I looked in front of them? Like some scammer. Like I don't know my own finances. Darren mumbled something I couldn't catch. Then her voice dropped. Low, dangerous. Is it your mother? Bingo. The next morning they avoided me. No mimosas, no fake apologies, no how did you sleep, Mom? Just silence and doors shutting quietly behind them. But the game was changing. When Darren finally texted me, Mom, are you okay? We need to talk. I didn't reply. Instead, I called my lawyer. Good morning, Evelyn, he said, his voice smooth and slightly too cheerful, like a man who'd never had to refinance anything alone. I'd like to restructure the will, I said simply, and move some assets into a trust. Something independent. He cleared his throat. Is there a reason for the urgency? There always is, I replied. We just usually call it hindsight. We began drafting that afternoon. Darren's portion would be held in quarterly review, Tasha's name removed entirely. Everything else, the condo, the savings, even the furniture I'd stored in climate-controlled oblivion, was funneled into a foundation I'd been researching, one that supports elderly women experiencing financial coercion. They say money doesn't buy happiness. Maybe. But it can buy clarity, leverage, and a well-dressed exit plan. Later that evening, Tasha knocked on my door. I didn't answer. She knocked again. Evelyn, we need to reset. I think things are just tense because everyone's been tired and confused. I watched her shadow through the doorframe. I know I've made comments, but they were just jokes. And maybe you're feeling sensitive lately. We all go through things. Translation, you caught us, but let's pretend you didn't. I'm making lemon chicken tomorrow, she added. You always like that, right? I waited. Then, gently, softly, I turned on the audio recorder on my bedside table and pressed record. Thank you, Tasha, I said through the door. I think I'll rest tomorrow. Silence. She walked away. Sometimes knowing you're being recorded changes everything, and sometimes it changes nothing at all. I spent the rest of the night cataloguing files, receipts, voice memos, photographs, labeled them in folders like an archivist at the Museum of Betrayal. Did you know octopuses have 3 hearts? 2 pump blood to the gills, 1 to the body. But when they swim, the main heart actually stops. Swimming stresses them. That's what betrayal does too. It stops something vital just long enough to make you forget how steady you once were. They thought I was floating through life like furniture. But furniture has memory. Every dent, every scratch. And I had finally stopped swimming. The freeze was only the beginning. The next wave didn't come loud, it came subtle, like mildew blooming behind wallpaper. They didn't confront me after the card fiasco. No fireworks, no direct accusations, just slow, deliberate inconveniences. Tasha moved the guest room chair. I liked my chair, the one that caught the morning light, saying, "We need space for yoga." The thermostat was suddenly erratic, cold as grief before sunrise, sweltering by lunch. I mentioned it once. "Oh, the app's glitchy," she chirped, like she wasn't the one tweaking it from her phone. Then came the schedule. Darren's planner, always left open on the kitchen island for Tasha's content planning, suddenly had a new entry, Mum shower. 7:38 only. With a little heart drawn next to it, I stared at it for a full minute. They weren't just sidelining me. They were time-boxing my dignity. I filmed it, of course. And every day that followed, I filmed a little more. Tasha, resetting the smart thermostat. Darren, brushing off her comments with chuckles that never reached his eyes. One night, I captured her saying, "It's not elder abuse if she doesn't know what's happening right." A joke, maybe. But jokes are just truths with better lighting. Old age wisdom for you cruelty doesn't always yell. Sometimes it just raises your shower temp by 5 degrees and waits for you to slip. I wasn't going to slip. Instead, I leaned into my quietest self, moved deliberately, ate meals silently, rewrote my legacy in motion, one whispered decision at a time. One evening, I heard Darren on the phone pacing near the back patio. "I don't know what's going on," he muttered. "She's acting strange, like she knows something, but she's just been distant, quieter than usual." I wanted to shout, "Darren, I'm not being quiet. I'm being strategic." But I didn't. Instead, I sent a message to Marot. Just one line, pull all financial activity flagged under Langford alias. A few hours later, she replied, "She's refinancing. Fast. And you're still listed on property docs." The cold that gripped me wasn't fear, it was confirmation. I was sitting in the living room when the next part arrived. Darren walked in with a glossy shopping bag. Not the plastic kind. The luxury kind, the kind with rope handles and tissue paper folded like origami. "Guess what Tasha found," he said with that tone men use when they're hoping you'll validate a purchase they can't justify. "She says it's a collector's piece. Vintage. A steal." He lifted it out like a magician, a pale cream designer handbag with gold hardware. So structured, it could probably support a small building. I recognized it immediately. Tasha had bought it 3 days earlier. I'd seen the charge. 743.35. Jewelry district. Card ending in 91. Our card. My card. I smiled and nodded. Darren looked relieved, like he'd dodged an emotional landmine. "She said you might not understand why it matters, but she swears it's an investment piece." "Oh, I understand," I said, my voice like steam slipping under a locked door. That night, I reviewed the account. 2 more transactions. One for a luxury diamond set 7,000 even. Another for a boutique order under the alias Langford. Every diamond Tasha wore, every silk blouse she flaunted was paid for with deception. And I was done waiting. Funny fact. Bananas are technically berries. Strawberries aren't. If that doesn't mess with your sense of reality, try waking up one day to discover your daughter-in-law is actively erasing your name from your own property. The next morning, I took the envelope with the freeze authorization form and placed it in my lawyer's inbox. No announcement, no warning. Just execution? 2 hours later, I received the confirmation all outgoing funds frozen. That afternoon, Tasha strutted through the living room wearing her new diamond necklace, oblivious to the fact that her next card swipe would spark panic. And I watched. I didn't smile. I didn't speak. But I thought about sloths again. How they barely move, how they hang back until it matters. I thought about the oldest bonsai tree in the world, over 1,000 years old. Still alive. Still growing. Trimmed by careful hands through wars, weather, neglect. I thought about how I used to believe kindness would always loop back around like a boomerang. But sometimes it doesn't come back. Sometimes you just let it go and build something better in the silence. 2 nights after the freeze, I heard a knock at my door. Not the usual rap, rap, rattle Tasha used when she wanted to perform concern. This was sharp, calculated. "Darren." "Mom," he called through the wood. "Something's wrong. Are you okay?" The bank froze our account. I didn't answer right away. I wanted him to hear his own breath. Wanted the hallway to echo with the absence of apology. He knocked again 3 times. Harder. Then the pause. That familiar sigh when he couldn't control the narrative. I opened the door just a crack. Enough to see his face. He looked unraveling. Not angry, not yet, but confused. And confusion in someone who built their adulthood on control always comes before panic. "What did you do?" he asked. I tilted my head like I hadn't quite heard. "What did you do, Darren?" I said gently. He blinked. The refinance paperwork bounced back. "We're getting calls now. And Tasha's card. Declined, yes, I know." "How?" "I read bank statements," I said. "And receipts. And wills. The same way I read bedtime stories to you when you were 7, only these don't end with lessons. Just losses." He shifted, like the floor had suddenly gone uneven. I did what you asked me to do years ago, I said softly. I saved us. You just didn't know who I was saving. And I closed the door. Later that day, I pulled the old jewelry box from the back of my closet. The one I hadn't touched since Harold died. Inside were things I thought I'd passed down: bangles, brooches, a sapphire pendant from my mother, the garnet ring Tasha once asked to modernize. She said, "It's a bit antique, don't you think?" Like she was trying to rewrite lineage with Instagram filters. I held each piece in my hands. Then I wrapped them in tissue, labeled them, and packed them into a case. The next morning, I walked to Elder Rise Foundation, a transitional housing nonprofit I'd quietly supported for years, and handed them the box. "These are not donations," I said. "They're bequests redirected." The young woman behind the desk blinked at me. "Are you sure?" "More than I've ever been about anything I said. Old age wisdom. Let me offer this. When you start reallocating sentiment, you begin reclaiming the person you were before they convinced you to wait your turn." That afternoon, I met with Marot again. She'd printed 3 flagged documents, refinance drafts, asset transfers, even a quitclaim deed that would have removed my name from the house if it had processed in time. All signed with my name, only I hadn't signed a thing. "She forged it," Marot said. "She believes she earned it," I replied. "Want to press charges?" "Not yet," I said. "Let's let her hang herself with velvet ribbon first." Did you know that crows can remember human faces for up to 5 years, and they hold grudges, smart birds? I think I might have been a crow in a past life. I returned home to a fake kind of calm. Tasha was in the kitchen dicing cucumbers like they'd insulted her. Darren scrolled his phone like it owed him redemption. "Think I'll lie down?" I said casually. "All these bank calls are giving me a headache." "Great idea," Tasha muttered, not looking up. "Nap it off." Upstairs, I didn't nap. I opened a slim black envelope. Inside, the preliminary report from the private investigator I'd hired 2 weeks earlier, under the alias Marjorie Quinn. I'd learned the name from a gravestone I used to pass during my walks with Harold. Poetic. Inside were photos, bank transfers, Shell LLCs, all linked to S. Langford, Tasha's maiden name, tied to boutiques I'd never heard of with transactions from accounts she thought I'd never find. At the very back, a photo of her entering a law office alone. The nameplate read, "Divorce and Family Law." She wasn't just erasing me, she was preparing for life after Darren. And she was using my money to do it. Here's something: quirky jellyfish have no brain or heart, but they've survived 5 mass extinctions. You don't need malice to endure. You just need patience and stingers. That evening, she barged into my room. "I know what you're doing," she snapped. "You're sabotaging us, punishing Darren for something he didn't even do." I blinked slowly. "I'm not punishing anyone, I'm just organizing. You know how much I like order. You froze everything." "No," I said calmly. I paused it. She scoffed, but her lips trembled. "I'm also looking for a new place," I added offhand. "Somewhere with space, silence, dignity." She stilled, like I'd hit a nerve she didn't even know was exposed. "What do you mean?" "I took a tour today," I said. "A condo, top floor, lots of natural light, no cameras watching my bathroom door." I walked past her, slow and unbothered, left her standing there in my shadow. She looked smaller than I remembered. Funny thing about people who tower over you emotionally, they shrink fast when you stop crouching. The voicemail came at midnight. No greeting, just static at first. Then a voice I hadn't heard in years, Alan McCormick, Darren's old business partner, the silent investor. "Mrs. Kingsley," he said, professional but clipped. "I don't know what you uncovered or how you got it, but it's real and serious." I sat up straighter in bed, the weight of the covers suddenly irrelevant. "We're launching an internal audit," he continued. "If Darren knew about any of this, I'll find out. If he didn't, well, then it means he's lost control." I didn't respond, of course. Not then. I just saved the message, made a mental note to forward it to Marot, and poured myself a glass of water so cold it burned going down. By morning, it was already unraveling. Tasha's boutique, the one I hadn't heard of until last week, was under review for suspicious transactions. Alan had flagged 2 fake vendor accounts she'd been using to launder funds from Darren's side of the company books. Consulting fees, she called them. Shell billing. How much? Enough to fund the designer closet she twirled through every time she filmed a Get Ready With Me video. They wore labels purchased with my legacy. So I did the one thing no one expected. I went shopping. Not out of impulse, out of intent. Tasha invited me to a boutique downtown. Said she wanted to reconnect and do something light. I said yes. I even smiled. We entered the store, which smelled like citrus mirrors and judgment. Tasha floated toward the display cases, running her fingers along leather bags like they were friends from childhood. "Do you like it?" she asked, holding up a new one. Soft cream gold accents, the kind of bag that screamed quiet privilege. I nodded. "It's polished." She giggled. "Vintage? Impossible to find in that color. But you know, some things just belong to certain women." I didn't flinch. Instead, I wandered to the clearance rack and pulled a plain navy hoodie. Unbranded. Thick. Soft. Tasha wrinkled her nose. "Oh, they have those." I walked to the counter, hoodie in hand, and slid my card forward, my personal card. The cashier folded it neatly. Before she closed the bag, I reached into my coat and tucked something inside a copy of the legal freeze authorization I'd had printed 2 weeks ago. I didn't tell anyone. That document was now legally filed. What I slid into that bag was a backup, a personal reminder. Sometimes paper holds more power than plastic. Later that day, I received a photo from my investigator. Tasha again. Outside a lawyer's office. Not the same one. This one specialized in asset protection and emergency trusts. Guess who she was protecting them from? That evening, I brewed tea and sat by the window. The city was turning golden, that soft peach hue where buildings look less like money and more like memory. I thought about Harold. How he used to say, "Truth doesn't yell. It waits." I waited. Until the podcast called. The Unseen Ledger. A financial justice podcast I'd only vaguely heard of before. The host, Nora, spoke with the kind of voice that made you feel seen and held at the same time. "We'd love to feature your story," she said. "Financial retaliation, elder dignity. You're exactly the voice we need." I almost said no. I'd spent years being quiet. But silence wasn't safety anymore. It was just camouflage. So I said yes. We recorded 2 days later. The studio smelled like paper and electricity. I wore my simplest sweater. No makeup. Just clean lines and unspoken resolve. I didn't realize how invisible I'd become. I said into the mic until I heard people talk about me like I'd already died. Nora didn't interrupt. Just let the silence wrap the room. "And when did you know it was intentional?" she asked softly. When she started logging my bathroom hours, I replied, "We paused there." Not because I needed to cry, because the world needed to feel that sentence sit in its bones. By the end of the episode, Nora looked at me with something close to awe. "You didn't burn the house down," she said. "You rewired it." "No," I said. "I just turned the lights on." The podcast dropped that Friday. By Sunday, it had 100,000 listens. Shakti Elder account was trending. Clips of my voice, over photos of diamond necklaces and frozen bank notifications, were stitched together by strangers on TikTok. Someone shared a side-by-side comparison of Tasha's influencer reel and my quote, "They measured me by perfume and pearls. I showed up with power." Tasha's page turned into a battlefield. Once a haven of brunch tables and filtered grins, it now brimmed with comments. "Was this before or after you drained her pension?" Those heels came with an indictment. "Your silence is louder than Evelyn's receipts." She blocked me, of course. I didn't notice. I was busy answering a different kind of message. One from Lynn G., a woman in Denver who wrote, "I worked for my son's company for 6 years. Unpaid. Believed I was helping him build. When I got sick, he cut me from the trust. I was ashamed. I thought it was my fault until I heard you. Thank you." I sat with that letter for an hour. Didn't cry. Just remembered how it felt to be seen. Sometimes the loudest justice isn't courtroom thunder. It's a whisper that spreads. 2 mornings later, the house phone rang. Landline. Old school. The kind of ring you can't mute without meaning to. Tasha answered first, her voice tense even before the greeting. "This is Tasha Kingsley speaking." A pause. Then her voice pitched an octave higher, just enough to carry through the hallway. "You've got the wrong number. I don't know anything about that. No one's being investigated." Click. She stood in the doorway for a moment, after hanging up, clutching the cordless, like it might report her for breathing too hard. I didn't ask. Instead, I opened the freezer and pulled out the basil I'd been keeping alive in an ice cube tray, a trick I learned from a woman at a gardening workshop years ago. Freeze the leaves in oil. Preserve flavor. Preserve future use. Preserve. That word stuck with me all day. Later that afternoon, Darren came home with a look I recognized from his teenage years, the one he wore when he'd crashed the car, but hoped if he walked slowly enough into the house, the damage would disappear. "Mom," he said, "we really need to talk." I was stirring lentils. He waited. I didn't offer him a seat. He rubbed the back of his neck. "We're in trouble. Some of the investors are pulling back. And Alan's being cagey." I said. "That sounds difficult." He exhaled through his nose. "Are you going to tell me what you're doing?" "No," I said gently. "I'm going to show you what I've already done." And I walked away. That night, I opened the file cabinet one last time, pulled out a fresh envelope. Inside a folder marked Lexman and Shaw Private Investigations. The final report. Shell LLCs? Forged signatures? Property equity loans filed in my name with Darren's digital approval and Tasha's fingerprints on the edits. At the very bottom, a copy of the $7,000 jewelry receipt from 3 weeks earlier. The necklace she flaunted at brunch. The one she called a symbol of arriving. I folded everything into a black envelope, sealed it, wrote no return address. Just one word on the front, Alan. The next morning, I dropped it at his office myself. Left it at reception without a word. By the time I returned home, my phone had 3 missed calls. Darren, Tasha, unknown number. I didn't check the voicemails. I let the silence grow legs. Here's an old age fact for you. There's a medical term called presbycusis. It's age-related hearing loss, especially to high frequencies. But that doesn't mean we stop listening. We just get better at filtering noise from signal. Speaking of signals, did you know the Eiffel Tower actually grows a few inches every summer due to thermal expansion? Heat stretches metal. Tension expands people too. And in that house, the tension had stretched us so far you could hear the creaking in the walls. Tasha stayed mostly in her office after that. Her door shut, her calls quieter. But the cracks showed. One night, I overheard her crying. Not the dramatic kind she used to perform in the kitchen with a towel perfectly draped over her shoulder and mascara neatly smudged. No, this was low, real cracked in half. I didn't mean for it to go like this, she whispered into the phone. Whoever was on the other end stayed silent. I thought I could handle it. I thought she'd fade. She was supposed to fade. I didn't move, didn't interrupt, just listened. The next morning, the boutique's social media account deleted 5 weeks of content. Gone were the flat lays of expensive jewelry, the CEO moments, the saw and boss bride brunch captions. Replaced by a message that read, "This page is temporarily under review for restructuring. Thank you for your patience." They didn't mean the brand. They meant her. That same day, I walked into the study and found her laptop open. Not just open browsing the bank's portal. My name already pre-filled in the username box. Forgot password blinking at the bottom. My hand tightened on the edge of the desk. Not because I was scared, but because I finally understood they weren't trying to erase me out of hatred. They were doing it out of habit. It had never occurred to them that I might fight back. That afternoon I made tea and waited. Sure enough, the door slammed at 4:37 p.m. Tasha burst into the kitchen. "They're freezing the boutique's assets now. The accountant says they're investigating shell accounts." Darren looked up from his phone, blinked like a man emerging from underwater. "What shell accounts? You told me to handle it," she snapped. You said I could move things around to make us look stronger. I said, keep it lean, he hissed, not launder it. They argued right there by the coffee machine. I sipped my tea in the corner like scenery. Then, in the middle of their bickering, I placed a thin white envelope on the counter. Neither noticed at first. When they finally did, Darren asked, "What's that?" "A copy of my amended will," I said. "Tasha, your name is no longer on it. Darren, your share is being held in quarterly review. I recommend getting a fiduciary." Tasha laughed too loudly. "You think you can just cut us out?" "No," I said. "I already have." And with that, I turned and walked upstairs. Sometimes you don't need thunder. Just a staircase and the right set of documents. Up in my room, I opened my messages. A new one from the legal team handling my estate. Confirmation of advisory board appointment, Cora House Foundation. You've been nominated for a founding seat. I closed the laptop gently, folded my scarf, smoothed my comforter. The house had never been quieter. And somehow I'd never felt more alive. The first time I realized the house wasn't mine anymore was when the mirror disappeared. Not stolen, not broken, just removed. The one above my vanity. The one Harold had bought me for our 20th anniversary, all curved oak and delicate edges engraved faintly in the corner with the initials E.J.H. Evelyn Joan Haroldson. My maiden name. I asked Darren about it once. He said Tasha thought it wasn't safe on the wall. Said something about anchoring brackets and earthquake codes. We don't live near fault lines. I didn't argue. I just nodded and let the bare walls stare back. But something in me hardened. They took my mirror, but I still knew who I was. That week I started giving things away, not as punishment, as precision. I opened the closet and sorted through the pieces of my life like I was curating an exhibit. Kept 3 coats, 4 pairs of shoes, 2 scarves. Everything else boxed, labeled, redirected. The garnet earrings went to Elder Rise Foundation. The sapphire ring I wore once a decade to reclaim her dignity, a women's financial literacy initiative. I even mailed off my vintage brooch to a woman named Lynn in Denver. Yes, that Lynn. The one who wrote me that letter. One by one, I peeled myself from the things they assumed I'd cling to. I wasn't shedding sentiment, I was refining it. Funny thing, jellyfish again. Some species can biologically revert to their earliest form. They never die of old age. They just reset. Maybe that's what I was doing. Resetting. One afternoon, as I was sealing a box of kitchenware labeled "to donate," my phone buzzed. It was from Harwin and Dade, the law firm that handled elder protection. The message was brief. Per the legal representation of Evelyn J. Kingsley, this is a formal cease and desist. Any further attempts to access her accounts, manipulate legal records, or slander her publicly will result in immediate litigation. I smiled. I didn't have to lift a finger. They were unraveling faster than I ever could have pushed. Tasha slammed her office door that night. Darren stormed out shortly after. No dinner, no pleasantries. Just rage echoing off minimalist walls. Meanwhile, I sat in the living room, sipping my now famous lemon balm tea, watching the fire flicker across a small bundle of documents I no longer needed. Photocopies only. Originals were safe elsewhere. That's another thing people forget. We old women may misplace car keys, but we never forget where we hide the real leverage. The next morning, I stood in line at the post office with one final envelope. Inside, documentation of all property transfers forged or otherwise. Destination: the Office of Elder Legal Protection. I addressed it anonymously. Concerned citizen. Then I walked to the bakery and bought a croissant, because sometimes reclamation tastes better with pastry. That same evening, a thin envelope appeared on the kitchen counter. No note. Just printed documents. I recognized the format instantly, a mediation request. From Tasha Kingsley Langford, represented by the law firm Brayson and Lee. Subject line: request for joint asset reassessment. It was desperate. She was spiraling. They had money but no access. Power but no passwords. And I was still calm. Did you know elephants can recognize themselves in mirrors? Very few species can. They don't just see a reflection, they know it's them. That's what she hated, I realized. Not that I smelled like lavender or sat too quietly, but that when she looked at me, she saw who she could never manipulate. I carried that truth to bed like a weighted blanket. The next morning, I received a new message from Nora, the podcast host. We've been contacted by a congressional office. They want to speak to you about legislation. They're calling it the Kingsley Clause. I read it 3 times. Then I laughed, out loud, alone. I didn't cry, but my hands did shake, not from weakness, from awe. My voice, my story, turning into something more than revenge, something systemic. The Kingsley Clause. Legislation that would prevent unauthorized refinancing or financial activity on joint accounts with elderly co-signers unless both parties provided biometric authentication. Sound boring? Good. That's how real power works. Quiet, precise, inked in black and white. That evening, I walked into the living room where Darren sat on the couch, shoulders slumped, staring at the fireplace like it might offer him a loophole. He looked up. His eyes were tired. I didn't know everything he said. I tilted my head. But you knew enough to say nothing. She made it seem necessary. I nodded. I used to do that too. Make things seem necessary. Like selling my jewelry to cover your first payroll. Or skipping vacations so you could hire that marketing firm. He winced. You said I'd never have to worry again. I continued. And now you worry every time your phone rings. He didn't argue. I'm moving, I added. Condo's almost ready. He looked surprised, then relieved. Like a man being released from a contract he forgot he signed. I hope it's nice, he said. It's quiet, I replied. That night, I opened a new bank account, not tied to anyone, under my full maiden name, Evelyn Joan Haroldson. And when I saw it there, black on white, no asterisk, no shared access, I finally exhaled. It was like hearing your real name called after years of being just Mum, just Gran, just her. And suddenly I wasn't just anything. I was me. The invitation came by text. Not flowers. Not an apology. Just a simple line sugared and brittle like overbaked meringue. Family dinner this Sunday. It would mean a lot if you joined. Let's move forward. No acknowledgement, no responsibility. Just a plea masked as peace. I stared at the screen for a long time. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I'd finally learned that power sometimes means waiting to speak. My response, one word. Accepted. But I wasn't arriving empty-handed. That Sunday, I stood in front of the mirror, the one they hadn't stolen, the one in my new condo. Soft light filtered through gauzy curtains. My scarf, a warm slate blue, lay across my shoulders. My blouse was pressed. My slacks comfortable but sharp. No pearls, no perfume, just presence. In my handbag, a sealed manila envelope, a digital recorder, and one freshly signed affidavit verifying the forgery of my name on 3 refinance documents. A different kind of dessert. I arrived right on time. They were already seated. Darren looked tired, Tasha radiant and over-perfumed, like she'd dressed for a redemption arc. Glad you came, Darren said, standing awkwardly. Tasha smiled like someone auditioning. Let's just have a normal night, okay? Of course, I said. Appetizers came. Small talk hovered like fruit flies. Tasha offered up weak jokes. Darren nodded like punctuation. Then, as the main course arrived, pan-seared halibut with saffron rice, I reached into my bag and pulled out the small speaker, placed it gently on the white linen tablecloth. What's that? Darren asked. Tasha's fork paused mid-air. I pressed play. Her voice, recorded cruel, careless, filled the room. Older people stopped noticing their odor. It's almost sad, like watching something rot in slow motion. She's already halfway gone. Once I get Darren to sign the final equity shift, she won't even know what hit her. A long silence followed. Tasha's wine glass shook in her hand. Darren's jaw clenched so hard, I thought he might bite through his own regret. You recorded me? Tasha spat a hiss beneath her wine breath. I documented the truth I said. Darren leaned forward. What is this, Tasha? Out of context, she blurted. You know how I talk when I'm venting. You've said worse. He didn't look at her, just stared at the envelope I now slid across the table. Bank records, I said. Withdrawal logs, cross-referenced purchases, screenshots, signature comparisons. I paused. Context. Darren opened the folder with shaking hands. The color drained from his face. He picked up a page, flipped it, read it again. I didn't know about this, he muttered. Tasha, you used the business account. I said we'd manage it, she snapped. You told me to fix the books. I told you to cut costs, not commit fraud. Their voices rose, their civility shattered like a wine glass dropped just off camera. And I stood. I won't be staying for dessert, I said. The waiter blinked as I passed, unsure if he should interfere. I handed him a slim black envelope. Please deliver this to the couple at the table, I said with a smile. Inside formal notice of pending civil litigation, filed that morning. Name Evelyn J. Kingsley, counsel Harwin and Dade. As I stepped outside, the city greeted me with mist. A soft drizzle, not enough to soak, just enough to feel new. Then the TV changed. Inside the restaurant, a screen mounted above the bar flicked to breaking news. Local businesswoman faces allegations of elder financial abuse. Investigations are underway involving joint account mismanagement and fraudulent equity transfers. The camera cut to a still image, a woman in large sunglasses entering a law office. Tasha. Inside, chaos bloomed. Outside, I didn't flinch. Instead, I walked calmly to my waiting car. The driver opened the door. I slid inside and shut it softly, like closing a chapter. Did you know that tree rings get tighter in times of drought? They don't stop growing. They grow more slowly, more intentionally. Scar tissue in wood, built to last. That's what I had become. Tasha and Darren measured wealth in handbags and investor dinners. I measured mine in silence evidence and legal filings. I didn't just reclaim what was mine. I rewrote the terms. That evening, I returned home to a neat pile of mail and one padded envelope addressed to me from the Women's Financial Foundation. Inside, confirmation of my advisory board seat. A note in handwriting that wasn't from a lawyer or clerk or assistant. You're not just a survivor. You're a system reset. I read it twice, then placed it on the shelf next to my birth certificate, next to the new version of my will, and next to the picture of me and Harold Young, hopeful, and now strangely full circle. That night, Tasha tried calling. She didn't leave a message, but I know what she would have said. I boiled a kettle, poured a cup of lavender tea, turned off the lights, and watched the clouds drift by from my own window. The sky was dark, but not empty. The letter came 2 days later. Thin envelope, heavy contents, inside confirmation from the estate reassignment division. Final notice. All claims from Tasha Kingsley Langford had been legally voided. All trust access terminated. No right of appeal. The final sentence. This completes the reallocation of all Kingsley family wealth. I read it over a plate of toast. No rush. The marmalade was just sweet enough to balance the moment. Later that morning, I walked to my closet, the new one. Clean, spacious. I had kept only what I loved. 3 coats, 2 scarves, 4 pairs of shoes, none of which hurt to walk in. Everything else had been boxed and given away, including the jewelry Tasha once hinted she'd inherit. Each item had been documented, appraised, and rehomed. The garnet necklace she once said would look better dipped in rose gold, donated. The antique ring she tried to wear without asking, sold at auction to fund emergency housing for women over 65. That afternoon, Darren came by. I heard the key in the lock. He didn't walk in, just pushed open the door and stood there the same way he used to linger outside his childhood room after a bad grade. I got something, he said, holding up a thick envelope. No return address. I already knew what it was. Inside receipts, donations, appraisals, and one final piece of thermal paper, a jewelry store purchase made months ago using the joint account, paper clipped beside it. A printout of the exact withdrawal with the account number blurred, except for the last 4 digits, 091. He sat at the counter and laid everything out. Tasha hovered in the doorway, arms crossed, jaw tight. "There's nothing left," she said. Darren nodded. "Nothing for you." He didn't say it cruelly, just clearly. I walked over, refilled my mug, and sat across from them. "You always assumed it would come to you," I said. "Not because you earned it, but because you were nearby when I got tired." Tasha scoffed. "We took care of you." "You monitored me," I corrected. "You scheduled my showers. You logged my meals." I sipped my tea. "And now I've logged your downfall." She stormed out. Darren stayed behind. "I never wanted this," he said. "But you didn't stop it either." He didn't argue. He just nodded, stood and left quietly, like someone who'd finally heard his own echo. That night, I received a message from Nora, the podcast host. "We've been nominated for an award. Your episode. They're calling it the Evelyn Effect." I closed my eyes for a moment, the phrase echoing in my mind. Not vengeance, not victory. Effect. That's what legacy really is, isn't it? Not the things we leave behind, but the way we ripple through others, the way we spark thought, change direction, reset expectations. Here's a fact for this chapter. The moon is slowly drifting away from Earth, about 1.5 inches per year. Tiny, imperceptible, until 1,000 years pass. That's what I had done. Not exploded, drifted, deliberately, irrevocably. I opened my laptop and reviewed the new trust structure one last time. Tasha's name removed, Darren's portion frozen. Quarterly audits required, no early withdrawal. The rest assigned to foundations, every cent earmarked. No memorial plaques, no dedication benches, just impact. I signed the final version, scanned it, sent it off. Then I made a cup of tea, pulled my scarf a little tighter around my shoulders, and walked out to the balcony. Below, the city blinked in warm golden dots, street lamps against fog. I didn't feel angry, or proud, or vindicated. I just felt done. That evening, a letter arrived in my inbox. Digital. Simple. From the Women's Foundation I'd partnered with. Subject: Welcome, Evelyn J. Kingsley. Your voice is now a cornerstone. They invited me to speak, to mentor, to be the woman I once needed when I was slipping quietly through the cracks. I accepted. Without fanfare, without signature perfume, just a firm yes. A neighbor from the old neighborhood emailed me too. She wrote, "Everyone used to think you were fading. Turns out you were just focusing. You're not who they said you were. You're who they feared you'd become." I saved that one, printed it, folded it carefully, and placed it beside my oldest photograph, me and Harold, on our wedding day, mid-laugh, him half-blinking me mid-eye roll. He always said I was the sharpest person in any room. Now I finally believed it. The podcast awards were held in a sleek glass building uptown, nothing extravagant, just clean lines and warm lighting that made everyone look a little braver than they felt. I didn't walk the carpet. I didn't pose for pictures. I slipped in quietly through the side door, wearing the slate grey coat that had by now become my second skin. The one Tasha once called funeral chic. Fitting in hindsight. The host of the evening, a bright-eyed woman in a velvet pantsuit, called the unseen ledger to the stage. Nora accepted the award with grace, her speech short, punchy, and unexpectedly tender. This story, she said, holding up the little glass trophy, wasn't about revenge. It was about precision. It was about reclaiming breath after years of being spoken over. Polite applause, a few teary nods. After the ceremony, she found me near the back exit, beside the potted ferns. "People want to meet you," she said. "They can want it." I smiled. She laughed. "You changed something, Evelyn." I remembered something I corrected, and then I didn't apologize for it. The next day I received 3 new emails, one from a publisher, one from a women's advocacy group, one from a financial education nonprofit, asking if I'd be interested in consulting on their curriculum. I accepted none of them. Not yet. Instead, I sat down with my tea hibiscus this time, sharp and grounding, and opened a handwritten letter from a stranger in Wisconsin. I'm 67. I co-signed a business with my son. I thought I was helping him grow. He told me I had to stop asking questions, said I was making things complicated. Then I heard your story. I froze the account. He's furious. But I slept for the first time in weeks. That one I folded twice and slipped into the back of my planner. Sometimes power is permission, and sometimes it's a whisper that says, "You're not crazy. You're just awake now." Here's a little academic flavor for this chapter. There's an emerging debate in sociology called post-retirement agency theory. The idea that aging doesn't diminish authority, but rather reveals its truest form. That's what I'd become. Not an afterthought. A thesis. Meanwhile, Tasha's influencer world had all but collapsed. Her curated feed lay dormant. No brunch shots, no haul videos. Just one last photo, her staring out a window filter, softened the caption reading, "Taking a step back. Thank you for understanding." Comments were disabled. Word on the street was her boutique had shuttered quietly. Not bankrupt, just absorbed. The shell accounts had been exposed in Alan's internal audit. The board had taken over. Cleaned house. I didn't need to dance on the ashes. I just needed to be somewhere else, where my reflection hadn't been borrowed or blurred. Speaking of borrowed, did you know the oldest functioning library is in Morocco? And it was founded by a woman, Fatima al-Fihri. 859 AD. That fact alone was enough to carry me through any moment of doubt. Because here's another one, I wasn't the first. I wouldn't be the last. But I was finally in the middle of my own story, not someone else's plot. The week after the awards, I hosted something small. 12 women, some older, some my age, one barely 40. All of us with one thing in common: we'd been dismissed, erased, minimized. And now we were rewriting our epilogues into prologues. The dining table stretched long and linen-covered. Some china was heirloom. Some was thrifted. The air smelled like rosemary focaccia and lemon. One woman shared how she'd hidden her own savings in a shoebox marked tax documents just to keep her husband from touching it. Another admitted she'd stayed in a bad situation because her name was nowhere on the deed, and she didn't want to start over with nothing. I didn't guide the conversation. I made space for it. When the laughter calmed and the light dimmed into golden quiet, I stood. I don't think any of us woke up and said, "Today I'll stop giving myself away." I said, teacup in hand. But somewhere along the line we did. They nodded. I was once told that power looks like pearls and perfume, but I've learned it's quieter, firmer. It shows up in court filings, donation slips, digital receipts. It's signing your own name and knowing no one else forged it for you. We raised our cups. "To dignity," I said. "To dignity reclaimed," they answered. Later, as the last guest stepped into the hallway, she turned and said, "You've built something real here." I smiled. "No," I said. "I just finally stopped giving it away." That night, I opened the last donation letter. The garnet set once destined for Tasha had raised nearly $18,000 in silent auction proceeds. I reread the line from the thank you card. "Your donation will fund transitional housing for 12 women this winter." 12, one for each woman at my table. Tasha said once that I was forgetful, but I remembered everything. Every lock code, every signature, every betrayal that tried to disguise itself as a favor. And now, I remembered that I wasn't a ghost haunting someone else's future. I was the architect of mine. The knock at my door didn't come with a voice. Just 3 short raps. Hesitant. Not quite brave enough to be firm. When I opened it, an envelope lay on the floor, no return address, just my name written in familiar cursive. Inside a letter from a new law firm. Not mine, Tasha's. "Our client has requested a mediated conversation. She wishes to resolve ongoing disputes with civility and mutual understanding." I laughed, not cruelly, just softly. It was like watching someone throw a rope down into a well they pushed you into, then asking if you'd be willing to pull them out. I didn't respond. Instead, I made tea. Jasmine this time. Let the kettle whistle. Then I walked to the small closet in the hallway where I'd stored the last of my sentimental items, the velvet box containing the real jewelry I'd kept. Not the ones they eyed. The ones they forgot I had. A ring from my 20s, earrings from my grandmother, a pendant I hadn't worn since Harold's last birthday. I didn't wear them now either. I held them, polished them, then closed the box. Not everything that sparkles needs to be seen. Later that evening, my phone buzzed. One new voicemail. Tasha. Her voice was raw, stripped of its Instagram polish. Evelyn, please. I don't want anything. I swear. I need to talk. Everything's gone. Darren won't even... I don't know where else to turn. Please just meet me once. The message ended with static, then silence. I didn't delete it, but I didn't play it again either. That night, I walked the Riverside Trail near my new building. The air was crisp, the city lights dancing on the water like confessions too shy to speak out loud. In my pocket, I kept the advisory board invitation card from Cora House Foundation. I hadn't framed it or filed it. I carried it. A reminder. Back at the condo, I placed it beside a photograph I'd recently pulled from storage, Harold and I, on our honeymoon. He was pointing at something in the distance. I was laughing at nothing. It was blurry, imperfect, but real. Like this new chapter. Here's your old age wisdom for this evening. Forgiveness and permission are not the same thing. One heals. The other enables. And a quirky fact to lighten the mood. Tortoises can breathe through their rear ends during hibernation. Nature makes space for odd solutions. Mine was legal filings and lemon tea. Their loss was silence. Mine was peace. That week, I turned down another publisher, another consulting gig. I wasn't ready to be a brand, but I did agree to one thing, a panel discussion at the Foundation's winter conference. The topic, Invisible No More Elders Agency and the Economics of Silence. I practiced the title once in the mirror, felt solid in the mouth, like granite with good posture. The morning of the event, I wore the slate coat. No brooch, just simple gloves and a linen notebook with a single quote scribbled inside. They measured me by pearls and perfume. I showed up with proof. The audience wasn't huge, but they listened. One woman cried. Another stood up and said, "You're the reason I finally called my lawyer." Afterward, someone asked if I had regrets. About what I said. Not speaking up sooner. I thought for a moment, then shook my head. No, because speaking too early would have made me angry. I waited until I could be effective. A few days later, Darren called again. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened the last envelope from my attorney. Confirmation that the commercial property Darren had built his financial consulting business in was still under my name through the shell trust Harold set up decades ago. One clause had never been amended. I held the deed in my hands and sighed, then signed the revocation papers. Ownership reassigned, control reinstated. The foundation I had partnered with would now lease the building for next to nothing, turning it into a financial literacy center for women over 50. They'd call it the Kingsley Collective. There'd be no plaque with my name, just warm rooms, open doors, and truth. Because legacy, real legacy, isn't what they remember you for. It's what they can no longer pretend didn't happen. That night, I pulled the original jewelry receipt from the boutique, the one for the diamond necklace Tasha bought with my money, slid it into an envelope, printed the statement from the account, circled the matching charge, addressed it to her. No note, no message, just documentation. I left it at the front desk with the rest of the outgoing mail. No malice, just facts. That's how you reclaim a story. Not with flames, but with folders. I didn't expect the podcast to go global. It started quietly, just a ripple. Then suddenly, I was the voice layered over TikToks, stitched between stitches. Strangers quoting me on social media, they measured me by pearls and perfume. I showed up with power. My face wasn't in any of the clips, just audio. But somehow that made it stronger. No filters, no rehearsals, just truth. Nora called me a few days after the surge. "You're trending," she said, half amazed, half amused. "How does it feel?" "Like I should vacuum," I replied. Because I was mid-clean, not metaphorically, literally. I was standing in my new living room, windows cracked open, letting fresh air sweep through quiet floors that belonged to no one but me. The envelope from Tasha had arrived earlier that day, inside a single note. I understand now. I hope that matters. I'm sorry. It didn't have the weight of regret. It didn't sting. It just felt late. I folded it once neatly and tucked it into the side pocket of a storage box marked past. Then I finished vacuuming. That evening, I brewed tea ginger, my go-to for strength, and stood in front of the closet again. Only this time not to empty it, to bless it. The shelves were clean. Just the essentials remained. 3 coats, 2 scarves. A pair of flats so soft they might as well be forgiveness. I had reclaimed this space, not just physically, spiritually, emotionally. Everything I used to cling to, things I thought were proof of love or family, I'd given away. Jewelry, china, even the antique mirror Harold gave me now, hanging in the hallway of the transitional housing shelter I helped fund. A volunteer there had emailed me. Women touch it and see themselves differently, like they matter again. I sat down on the edge of the bed, holding the last photo I had of Darren as a child. Tiny hands, bowl cut, front teeth missing. We'd been at the zoo. He was clutching cotton candy and grinning so wide you'd think the world owed him nothing but kindness. I didn't cry, but I did let myself feel the gap. The canyon between that boy and the man who let someone use me like furniture. He'd apologized once vaguely, said I didn't know how bad it was. I didn't say it out loud then, but I'll say it now. You didn't want to know. The next day, I received a final document from my legal team. The official stamp. Transfer complete. The commercial building now belonged to the Financial Literacy Foundation. Darren's name had been removed from all beneficiary lines. No more legacy on cruise control. No more generational wealth funneled through filters and brunch captions. It was precise now. Intentional. Every cent, every clause accounted for. Do you know the lifespan of a monarch butterfly? It varies. Some live just a few weeks. But one generation born in late summer can live up to 8 months, just long enough to migrate thousands of miles and start something new. That's what I was. A late summer woman, built to fly farther. That evening, I received a small package, no return label. Inside, a silver locket. Tasha's handwriting on the note. I found this in one of your old boxes. I think it was meant for someone. If not me, maybe someone else. But I wanted to return it. The locket was empty, polished, untarnished. I held it for a while, thought about what to do with it. And then I walked to the bookshelf and placed it on the top shelf next to the binder of legal forms, podcast scripts, and donor reports. Not as a relic, as a reminder that things like people don't have to be worn to carry weight. That night, as rain swept across the windows in soft waves, I played an old Nina Simone record, the one Harold loved, the one we danced to in the kitchen during winters when the heat barely worked, but the music made us forget. And I danced again, alone, unwatched, unburdened, not to prove anything, but because the beat still knew my name. I didn't see Tasha again after that, not in person at least. She disappeared from most of her usual circles. No more influencer panels, no more TEDx talks about modern aging or intergenerational wisdom. Her boutique quietly rebranded under a new name with a new face. She went silent in the loudest way possible, but her ghost lingered. Emails still trickled in, some from old acquaintances pretending they didn't know the whole story. Others from women who did know and wanted to say thank you. One in particular stood out. My daughter calls me forgetful, says I'm slowing down. But I showed her your story. Now she asks me to double-check her contracts. Thank you for helping me earn back respect I never should have had to fight for. I read that one twice, then printed it, folded it, and tucked it into the same drawer that held my photo with Harold. By now, the drawer was thick with letters from strangers who had once been invisible even to themselves. That was the real inheritance I'd passed down. Not jewelry, not real estate, but the sound of someone clearing their throat after years of swallowing their truth. Speaking of truth, here's your academic bite in ethics. There's a concept called moral injury. It's not physical harm, but psychological damage caused by betrayal of what one knows to be right by someone in a position of power. That's what this was. Not financial abuse. Moral injury disguised as family. One morning, I hosted a second gathering at my condo, same women as before, plus a few new faces. The table was longer now. I'd added another leaf and borrowed chairs from the neighbor across the hall. The theme was legacy without apology. We drank herbal tea and ate lemon shortbread and spoke in full sentences. One woman, Sarah, shared how she'd recently renegotiated her home deed after her son tried to streamline the process by listing himself as sole beneficiary. She smiled as she said it. He didn't expect me to read the fine print. We clinked our teacups to that. Another woman said she'd gifted her granddaughter a budgeting app instead of money for college clothes. She needs tools, not outfits. They laughed. There was no pity here, only power. After dessert, we sat in quiet for a few minutes. Just the sound of rain against the windows and the occasional clink of spoon against porcelain. Then I stood up and said I used to think dignity came in silence. That if I stayed polite, stayed patient, people would meet me there. I paused. But silence without boundaries is just surrender. The room nodded. I'm not angry anymore, I added. I'm just not apologizing for being awake. That night I wrote my final letter. To myself. Not dramatic, not poetic, just a record. Of what had happened, what I'd done, what I'd reclaimed. It ended with a single line. You didn't lose your voice. You just stopped waiting for permission to use it. I sealed it in an envelope and placed it in the back of the closet. Not for anyone else, just in case I ever forgot. The next morning, the foundation launched their official press release. The Kingsley Collective was open. The Financial Literacy Center was live. The first class, How to Spot Quiet Theft in Plain Sight. Enrollment was full by noon. The same day, I received a hand-delivered package from the legal office handling my trust. Inside, a final confirmation. The commercial building title had been transferred. Ownership now belonged to the foundation. I was no longer just a name on a file. I was the legal origin point of a system reset. Later that evening, as dusk rolled in with the smell of wet pavement and early jasmine, I pulled out the scarf I hadn't worn in months. The dusty rose one, the one I wore the day Tasha mocked me at brunch. I tied it slowly, carefully, then untied it just as gently, laid it across the back of my chair. I wasn't wearing old armor anymore. I didn't need to be dressed for defense. I was home. I used to think the end of a story was a door closing. Now I know better. It's a window opening in a quiet room. A breath. A shift in the air. The absence of noise where tension once lived. My new condo was still. Not silent, but settled. I'd moved the last box the day before. Not of things of paper. Letters. Deeds. Journals. Court filings. Receipts. Proof. I stacked them neatly in the storage ottoman by the window. Not hidden, archived. My story didn't need to be read every day to remain true. That morning, I received a postcard. From Nora, a watercolor of a small mountain town. Soft strokes, blue peaks. No words on the front, just a handwritten message on the back. Thank you for teaching us that aging is not erosion, but refinement. I placed it beside the tea canister. A reminder that echoes don't need microphones. Later, I opened my email. A journalist had written a long-form piece about the podcast and its impact. The headline, The Kingsley Effect, When Elder Quiet Becomes Cultural Noise. In it, she described my voice as the kind that doesn't rise at roots. I closed the laptop and smiled. Harold would have loved that line. That afternoon, I took the bus to the building downtown, the one that used to house Darren's consulting office. Now transformed. The new sign was up the Kingsley Collective. Inside, sunlight streamed across fresh floors. Books lined the shelves. Laptops hummed. A group of women, grey-haired, bright-eyed, sat around a table learning how to read loan contracts. A volunteer saw me at the door and waved. "You're here," she whispered, like I was a secret she'd been keeping. I walked inside, not ceremoniously, just present. Someone handed me a tea, mint, sweet. They showed me the framed quote on the wall. They measured me by pearls and perfume. I showed up with power. It sat above the reception desk. Quiet, sharp, permanent. Later that day, I stood in the back as the first cohort of women finished their session. The youngest, maybe 52, turned to the rest and said, "I used to think asking questions made me look ungrateful. Now I know silence is more dangerous." They clapped, not loudly, but with certainty. As the crowd dispersed, a woman approached me, maybe late 60s. Crisp blouse eyes like polished stone. "I was you," she said. 10 years ago." "No," I replied. "You were always you. You just forgot your shape." She nodded, and we sat together for a while without needing to fill the silence. That night, I took the long way home, stopped by the old street, the one with the house I used to live in. The lights were off. "For sale, sign up again." "Vacant?" I stood across the street for a moment, not to mourn, just to remember. I once loved that house, its garden, its kitchen, the way Harold used to hum while making coffee. But a house is not a home when your name fades from the deeds. A house is not a home when your voice has to ask permission to speak. So I turned away, walked back to the new place, opened the door, took off my shoes, boiled the kettle, and stood in the kitchen. No hums, no ghosts, just me. Here's something strange: owls can rotate their heads up to 270 degrees. They see the past, the side, the future, almost all at once. That's how I felt that night. Looking back, looking around, and looking forward without flinching. Before bed, I lit a single candle, not for ceremony, for softness. Then I wrote one last line in my notebook. Not a quote, not a plan, just a truth. I am no longer waiting to be remembered. I am simply living to be known. And with that, I slept, deep, without lock codes in my mind, without footsteps to listen for, just breath and room for me. If you had told me a year ago that I'd be living alone in a small condo with lemon tea steeping beside my desk and strangers quoting my name on national radio, I would have smiled politely and not believed you. But life, I've learned, isn't a straight line. It's a spiral, circling back to moments we once ignored, offering second chances in quiet disguises. There's no dramatic end to this story, no curtain call, just a slow unfolding of peace. Some mornings I wake before the sun and watch the light fill the room inch by inch. It doesn't ask permission, it simply arrives. And I suppose that's what I've become: light that no longer waits. The scars are still there. The memory of the forged papers, the silence that grew like mold behind polite conversations, the way they almost rewrote me into a footnote. But I'm not bitter, because I remembered who I was before they edited me, and now I live with open windows and closed loops. I volunteer at the center twice a week. I write letters to women I may never meet, but who understand me without needing the details. Sometimes I hear from Darren. Short notes, updates, apologies he doesn't always say out loud. I let them come, but I no longer wait for them. My legacy isn't tied to him, or her, or even the name they once tried to sell without asking. It's in the room full of women learning how to read their bank statements, in the woman who stayed when her son told her to leave, in the quiet cup of tea I pour not for guests, but for myself. Because I'm here now, not fading, not fragile, just finally whole.